Is everybody okay? Everyone ready? Welcome, good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education meeting for June 1st, 2021. This is our last regular meeting of the year, and we will start, as we always do, with the roll call.
Ms. Aronson?
Present.
Dr. Chang?
Here.
Ms. Poland?
Here.
Dr. Steinberg?
Here.
Dr. Thomas-Farquharson?
Here.
Ms. Wilcox? Here. Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Student Representative Lillian Sweeney?
Here.
Rochelle Yerbelli?
Here.
Thank you. And Rochelle, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order tonight, but I am pleased that we do have, for the first time since last March, student participation. So I would like to welcome the Hall DECA Student Association.
All right. Hello. I'd like to start with a hypothetical. So Jane Doe just graduated college with a bachelor's in business administration and around $30,000 in student loan debt. Even though there's a tough job market out there, she was able to get a starter job with a salary of around $50,000. But Jane soon realizes that $30,000 she took out as a loan was not as easy as it thought she would be. And after the $50,000 on a 12-month basis after taxes, she realizes she has less than $3,000 of take-home pay per month. Less than $3,000 to pay all her bills, her food, her medication, her transportation, and her student loan payments. Realizing this unfeasible situation, Jane is forced to put her expenses on her credit card bill. And she's also forced to make payments, but only minimum payments on her student loan bill, racking up interest rates and racking up credit card debt. As the months pass on, Jane is forced to declare bankruptcy, and Jane can't even think about retirement because she's too busy trying to pay her own bills. Despite this being a hypothetical, this is a reality for many. As of 2021, the student loan debt has reached a peak of $1.71 trillion, with about 19% of bankruptcies being identified as a cause of student loans. In addition, the average college student has about a credit card balance of $1,183. So seeing these financial crises, the Hall DECA Club would like to present to you Equity in Finance. I'm Abhinav Atha, and I'm the president of DECA.
I'm Tina Chen.
I'm Sal Bakri.
And this is Equity in Finance, and we are Hall DECA. So a few things about DECA. DECA is an international organization that prepares emerging leaders in 4 career clusters at the college and high school level. And a couple of things we've done are community and school outreach, along with participating in competitions at the national and state levels. In addition, with fundraisers, and we own our own school-based enterprise called the Warrior Warehouse.
So financial literacy, a skill everyone needs. So some might ask, what is financial literacy? Well, financial literacy is attaining the key knowledge and ability to make important financial decisions. Examples of this include loans, credit card debt, insurance, taxes, and even mortgages. So financial literacy helps students become more educated and aware of their future. Statistics show that nearly half of Americans over 55 have $0 in retirement funds. And if that wasn't enough of a warning, banks have pocketed over $34 billion in overdraft protection in just 2017. And luckily, we learn all these things in financial literacy. Education, foresight, and being financially aware in life. We learn all that and more in financial literacy.
So in our research, we decided to focus on three main determinants of financial literacy: race, wealth, and age. Today, by the way, is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, in which tens of millions of dollars of black wealth were stripped away from the African American community, which still affects black households today. This image here shows the great disparity in wealth between black, Latino, and white families. Their research shows that the average black median household income wealth is projected to drop to $0 in 2053. We have failed minority students. They are more likely to borrow more student loans, acquire more credit card debt, and drop out of college due to their finances, thus starting off at lower salaries. In Harris's and Yellowit's studies, black borrowers incorrectly believe that they have a higher credit risk, creating an outcome where black borrowers underinvest in home equity. Basic skills like budgeting, reconciliation, goal setting are all tools minority students absolutely need to build wealth. These are skills that you learn in financial literacy. Although our system fosters racial wealth inequality, we can give those with disadvantaged backgrounds a financial education. We can greatly reduce the disparities in wealth through representation and education found in these classes, and help those who are close to no median wealth.
So we've discussed a little bit about the national data in terms of how these statistics impact our students, but the Hall DECA Club also initiated a student survey in which we asked students to assess their financial literacy on 3 questions we felt were most relevant to students concerning student loans, budgeting in terms of salary, and a credit card question in terms of debt. And we found that the average student only scored 21%. And we found that students who said no to financial literacy, or students who said they haven't taken financial literacy, tended to score lower than students who supported financial literacy or students who have taken financial literacy. So it's clear that many students lack a basic understanding or grasp of financial knowledge that they will need in the future. In addition, we surveyed parents, and we found that 91% of parents supported making financial literacy a graduation requirement. And more than half of these parents are worried about their child's finances post-high school, and they do not believe that the WHPS system currently prepares its students for the financial future. We see this sentiment echoed out through many parent testimonials where they don't know if there are options, or they don't know if the school provides equitable financial education to everybody. And they understand that the skills learned in financial literacy are essential and can be applied to almost any aspect of their lives. CET is ranked number 37 out of 50 states in terms of financial literacy. In addition, a study done by Champlain College gave an F to Connecticut in terms of financial literacy for educating its students. As WHPS, by pioneering this course and making it a graduation requirement for all students, we can trailblaze a way for other schools to make this a graduation requirement, and we can help increase our financial literacy rating, which in the end only helps our students. So some key takeaways.
We want to mention that there are some positives, really good positives, like college. Financial literacy is such an important tool when taking out loans and applying for financial aid. Building wealth, and there are building wealth for basic financial foundations to retirement, having kids, and investing in property. And there are minimal prerequisites. You don't really need a degree to be financially literate. Everyone can learn how to be financially literate.
We thought we could take some time to address the cons about making this and address some refutations towards it. We understand that the WHPS system already puts an immense stress on students taking classes in terms of what they have to fit in their schedules. But once again, we ask you to consider what students will have to do in their real lives. They won't have the option to do their taxes or to not do their taxes or to budget or make a plan, because these are things they have to do. So this should be a thing they have to learn in high school to prepare them. In addition, we understand that there's a logistical component in terms of creating new classrooms or having teachers to accommodate the new student body taking financial literacy. But we see that in the end, this will pay off because we're educating our students and to be prepared for the real world. And we understand that it's a commonly thought belief that many parents will educate their children in financial literacy. But we find that in many of the parent testimonials that we surveyed, many parents didn't talk about financial literacy with their children because they didn't know how to. A classroom provides an objective way for students to learn about financial literacy, and it makes sure that they are learning about financial literacy. In another study, we found that 50% of parents were afraid to talk about their finances with their children.
So back to the Jane Doe situation. So if Jane Doe had taken financial literacy, she could have reduced not only her student loans through grants and financial aid, she could have also paid off her interest while still being in college. She would have been known to check her credit report and FICO score and manage her bank account, preventing overdrafts and mispayments. She would have also increased her human capital through internships and gained the ability to negotiate a starting salary for a better future. Thank you.
And we will now open it up to questions, if you have any.
I'm sure we do. Thank you. Do any other board members have questions? Jason?
Thank you, guys. That was incredible. Really appreciate the research that you did with the students and the parents. I think that's really, really great. If you have like a summary of the research with the findings and stuff, it would be great to have that. So if you could circulate that somehow, that would be wonderful.
Sure, we can do that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Lorna?
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation, all that was highlighted, and certainly talking about the benefits and value of generational wealth. If you can please share, what is one thing that you learned from this experience where you feel more empowered now than you may have prior to taking this class, this course?
I can't speak for the other two on this panel, but I think one of the biggest things in financial literacy that really helped me was the fact that I could actually learn negotiation skills in terms of asking a future boss or a future supervisor about like salary and things like that, because my own teacher in financial literacy was telling me how she didn't negotiate and how she wished she could have, and to never sell yourself short in terms of that. So I definitely feel that those skills I learned in terms of confrontation when you really need to are things that you learn in financial literacy that many other people don't necessarily think that, oh, maybe I shouldn't accept the first offer.
I just wanted to add also, before I started taking financial literacy, I was just another kid who, enjoyed to play video games, his whole free time and all that. And after I took financial literacy, it actually motivated me to open a bank account and actually go find a job and get working, because I actually liked the idea of being smart with your financial savings and like investing and all that. And it got me really into that kind of stuff and helped me mature a lot quicker than usual.
So I haven't taken financial literacy yet, but this year has been, my family owns a family restaurant, and they're struggling a little bit, and they had to apply for PPP loans. And while I was looking through it, I realized I did not know anything on that, and it really made me disheartened, because my family was struggling, but I did not know anything about like their struggles and know like any of the specifics. So that really motivated me to take it next year. So I'm really excited to start financial literacy and advanced finance next year.
Excellent. I think I'm not stepping out of line by saying we are all very proud of you, and continue learning, continue learning.
Amanda?
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. Your research is very consistent with a lot of what other students are saying who are in similar situations with their clubs at schools. And when I've done focus groups with students over the years, this almost always comes up as one of the things that they most want to learn. So I'm just curious, do you have opportunities to connect with students in other districts and in other areas to talk about these issues and do collaborative learning, or are any of those opportunities available that you're aware of?
Our DECA, especially, we have these programs at state levels and national levels where you talk to like members from other districts, you collaborate, and they have these like competitions where they do these team building, and they teach you how to be leaders, and you win awards, and sometimes it's really fun. We had this one thing where you try and guess, what was it? Well, basically you learn a lot about becoming a leader in the financial world and being an entrepreneur, and some of it is really fun, I think.
So I think you do have the opportunity to connect with other districts in DECA, but I don't think the opportunity is extended to the general student body population in terms of learning financial literacy or looking at, understanding this in terms of the other districts of Connecticut.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. It's so nice to have students back at our board meetings, and I know I learned a lot, and hopefully we'll be able to use your research moving forward. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to public communications, and we did have some members of the public sign up to speak. So I will ask first Kate Capps, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I hope. Can you let me know if you're here and ready for public comment?
I'm here.
Great. So each member of the public will have 3 minutes to provide public comment. Our board will not respond directly to your public comment, so I just want to lay that out in advance. And okay, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. After listening to the first reading of the proposed equity policy, I'm concerned and disheartened that West Hartford plans to adopt and implement curriculum and policies that use language such as that in the equity policy. Words and phrases such as equity, privilege, historical systems of racism, and lived experience all stem from critical race theory, which is Marxist in ideology. This language is currently being forced on our children daily. If the U.S. adopted an equity-based form of government, it would be the end of private property, individual rights, and freedom of speech. What will equity look like in our schools? The bedrock principle in the founding of our nation is equality. Equality means equal treatment no matter race, creed, or sexual orientation. Equality demands unbiased competition and leads to outcomes which are based on one's God-given talent and desire for excellence. Equity equals outcomes which are achieved by preferential treatment based on race, creed, and sexual orientation. Equity will not allow children to reach their fullest potential. Equality will. A high-performing school system in Northern Virginia has just eliminated accelerated math courses before 11th grade in order to improve equity in mathematics learning. For equity's sake, all children in that school system will be confined to grade-level math instead of flourishing in true ability. How long before this form of equity comes to West Hartford? I'm concerned that it will not be long before having a difference in opinion or certain religious beliefs will be seen as hate speech, and all who do not conform to approved language will be seen as haters, dissenters, or racists. This is already happening across America and beginning to enter West Hartford schools. Currently, few, if any, organic conversations are happening in classes, and often only one position of an issue is being presented to children. Almost no counter-arguments are represented. This is what policies like the equity policies lead to, teaching children what to think instead of how to think by weighing issues and forming judgments. Equity destroys critical thinking. In the recruitment section of the equity policy, it says equity means that West Hartford will now show preferential treatment, especially to those from underrepresented backgrounds. This is how equity masquerades itself. It's racism in disguise. Will West Hartford now forego supporting and retaining the most qualified educators for our children in lieu of a quota system? Schools and universities across the U.S. who have implemented equity policies are now offering graduation ceremonies based solely on race and ethnicity. In the name of equity, segregation is being reintroduced as good. I ask you to rethink this equity policy and not adopt it tonight. In the end, equity will not unite. It will divide and confuse children, and it will limit or obliterate free speech, and it will have our children focus on skin color, ethnicity, and gender rather than the inherent dignity we have as children of God. Thank you.
Thank you. And my apologies, I forgot to ask you to start off by stating your name and address. Could you state that for the record, please?
My name is Kate Kappis, and my address is 50 Maplewood Avenue.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Brian Fleming.
Hello, this is Brian Fleming. I live at 34 Lindwall, West Hartford. After the first reading of the policy, I sent out some questions to the board that I would like to read into the record. The questions that I sent on May 4th, I'll list these real quick. Number one, do you believe that people should be treated differently in our schools based on the color of their skin? Number two, anti-racism, which you are promoting as an official school policy, holds that all white people are racist and all institutions of society are racist. Do you consider yourself a racist? If so, what specific acts of racism have you committed? If you do not consider yourself a racist or cannot confess to a specific act of racism, can you explain why you are innocent of something everyone else is guilty of? Number three, you've announced that our school will now be an anti-racist organization. Anti-racism explicitly calls for discrimination on the basis of race. The leader of anti-racism movement, Ibram X. Kendi, writes that, quote, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination, end quote. What specific racial discrimination policies are you adopting in order to become a quote-unquote anti-racist school? Number four, you have grouped a number of new school policies under the concept of advancing social justice. Can you define, using specifics, what social justice means? Do you believe that people who disagree with social justice policies you support are advocates of injustice? Since you are working to introduce a new curriculum and policy that sees education through the lens of race, it would be helpful to understand how you define race. How exactly do you define someone as black, white, Latino, or Asian? Is someone with a black or Hispanic grandparent a person of color? What about one grandparent? What metrics do you use? Number six, are all white people inherently more privileged than all black people regardless of individual circumstances? Is a white child who drops out of school and lives in poverty more privileged than a black child who attends an elite private school and has wealthy, successful parents? Number seven, there's a statement made by the Board of Education in the last reading stating that our school system and community at large are systemically racist. What specific incidents led you to make this statement, and what actions were taken to remedy those incidents? Number eight, will you disclose publicly how much money our district and school are spending on new race, gender, and social justice initiatives? How much is being spent on teacher training programs, EDI consultants, and quote-unquote audits of the school? If you've hired someone to carry out an audit, will you release it to the public so parents and students can see it? If not, why not? Number nine, how will these anti-racist policies positively impact student achievements and test scores? Number 10, how will these policies prepare younger students for rigorous academics in high school and high school students for rigorous studies in college? And finally, number 11, what evidence do you have to show that implementing these policies will increase our test scores across all grade levels? And in conclusion, one of the my main points here that I'm mostly concerned about this policy is that there's not clearly defined what metrics in which you're going to implement this policy. How are you measuring the success of this policy? And is this policy easily can be replicated? I think that's the most troubling part about this is that if this gets rolled down to the educators on the front lines, this policy, in a sense, just seems like it's relatively open-ended for interpretation. It just, in a sense, it makes it feel like we just need to try harder. But there's no metrics, nothing's being measured. And I think...
Can you wrap up, please?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. As a closing I'll just leave it at that. I know there's other people that want to speak tonight, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Frank Frisoli.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Frank Frisoli, 9 Linwell Drive. I live with my wife, Catherine, and 2 sons, Emerson, finishing the 2nd grade at Budby, and Ronan finishing kindergarten also at Budby. I've spoken to over 50 parents for the feedback on the policy, and this is their voice. We must explicitly state within any policy for West Hartford Public Schools, whether we label it equity or otherwise, that we shall not provide preference nor discriminatory prejudice in regards to race, gender, or any protected class in accordance with the 14th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Connecticut Constitution Declaration of Rights and Code of Fair Practices. We must be very careful not to institutionalize discrimination in the name of equity. For example, race cannot be considered in the allocation of finite resources. Preference to one group is prejudice to another. We cannot state that race will be one of many considerations, as this admits that all else being equal, 2 students the same in every other way will be treated differently based on something they cannot help, the color of their skin. Failure to specify the mechanisms by which this equity policy will operate and the metrics by which this policy will be measured, in addition to comments by members of this board that have been interpreted by many as the consideration of discriminatory practices with respect to the allocation of resources, has already created feelings of fear and alienation within this community. For example, I received a comment from an Asian parent asking if their child would be valued as 3/5 of a student, as well as similar comments from more than one Jewish parent. There could be no reasonable objections to deduct language of any policy. Failure to do so, along with commitment to full transparency, will be a red flag for all to see and will create an unrelenting environment of charges of racism. Every time a student does not get the help they feel is needed or is treated differently in any way, they and their parents will be left to wonder if it is because of the color of their skin. This will poison the classroom as well as interactions between parents, teachers, and administrators. No one wants to be in that environment. We have a wonderful school system with top ranks in the state in achievement, including 4th in the state for equity, according to niche.com. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Irrespective of cause, be it aptitude, home environment, economic disadvantage, or other reasons, disparities in achievement are detected by our current system. We trust in our teachers to work with parents and special support staff to tailor the help needed to the individual, not to groups based on skin color, in order to give each student, regardless of background, the best chance of success. We need to be very careful in consideration of any proposal to abandon this tried and true approach. We must meet with great skepticism any changes that takes decision-making away from the excellent teachers and engaged parents we trust to determine the needs of each child. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe there's anybody else on the call. So we will move on. Thank you to those who've called in. We will now move on to unfinished business. And our first item is item A, a motion by Amanda Aronson, Lorna Thomas-Farquharson, and Elizabeth Wilcox to accept the new policy 1800 regarding educational equity. This is the second reading. The recommendation is that the Board of Education approve as a second and final reading the following new policy, which is proposed by the Board of Education Policy Subcommittee, Policy 1800, Educational Equity. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Liz.
Thanks, Deb. Tonight is the second reading of the West Hartford Public School Educational Equity Policy. We will address modifications to the policy and provide clarification. Connecticut General Statute Section 10-4A creates a statutory duty for West Hartford Public Schools Board of Ed to, quote, reduce racial, ethnic, and economic isolation, end quote. After the first reading of the West Hartford Public School Educational Equity Policy, language acknowledging the statutory mandate was added to the introduction. So some background. In 2015-2016, as the district began its strategic work in equity and diversity, Dr. Rosina Haskins was named Director of Diversity Advancement. In her role, Dr. Haskins was tasked with, among other things, looking at our policies and procedures under an equity lens. During this same time the Equity and Diversity Council, also known as the EDC, was formed. The EDC is comprised of members of the West Hartford Public Schools faculty and staff who partner with parents, caregivers, and a host of community agencies. This was the start of our formal work as a district in the area of equity and diversity. This work continued during the 2016-2017 school year, when West Hartford Public Schools committed to the building of our cultural competence. A framework was developed which included a continuum of cultural awareness, cultural responsiveness, and cultural advocacy. The EDC subcommittees were created at this time. The West Hartford Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, also known as the EDI, parent groups began, and parent groups at many of the schools were formed. Our educational equity research began in 2017 and continued for the next few years. We partnered with ReCenter and followed developments of their equity assessment, which ultimately helped inform our work. We continued to work with CERC, the State Educational Resource Center, and CREC, the Capital Regional Educational Council, in the areas of equity and inclusion. During the 2019-2020 school year, Dr. Haskins was appointed the full-time Director of Diversity Advancement, signaling our firm commitment to our work in this area, which resulted in the office reorganization during the 2020-2021 academic year. Dr. Haskins' new title was Director of the Office of Equity Advancement, and 3 new supporting positions were created. EDC was also reorged, and 3 subcommittees were formed to better align with our commitments. The Equity and Anti-Racism Vision Statement was adopted. One Community for Equity, a group that combines members from parent-led organizations and members from community groups, was created. Since policy creation is under the purview of the Board of Education, it was decided during the 2020-2021 school year that the Board of Ed's Policy Committee should begin drafting an educational equity policy. All of the work from the Office of Equity Advancement was utilized. The EDC formed the Educational Equity Policy Work Group to aid in the development of the policy. During this period, and over the years since the creation of the Equity Office, many suggestions from EDI parent groups, community groups, and individuals were taken into consideration. We also used data from experts in the field of equity, like CERC and CREC, as well as guidance from our legal counsel. All of this work has resulted in the policy before us tonight. Clearly, our work in the realm of equity advancement has been progressing for some time. Many hours of outreach, research, and collaboration have led to the creation of the West Hartford Public School Educational Equity Policy, the codification of our work as a district over the last 6 years in the field of equity. We did not create this policy hastily, but rather it was a deliberate process involving many interested members of our community. This policy is neither the beginning, nor is it the end of our work in this area. Instead, it is a living document meant to create the governance necessary to implement the important work in the area of equity.
So as has been shared with the process, we have, over the course of time, taken in a lot of feedback, a lot of suggestions, a lot of criticisms, a lot of input in terms of this policy. And just want to give an overview in terms of the management and the governance of a policy, because that has certainly come up in many ways with some feedback in terms of where we are today. But first off, just in terms of the Board of Education's overall role. As we know, the Board of Education derives authority from the state constitution and the statutes of the state of Connecticut. Furthermore, we know that the Board of Education acts as an agent of the state government with all authority and limitations imposed by the General Assembly and state constitution. Now, there are 3 primary roles of the Board of Education. One is in regard to the budget. We certainly know that is a process we have gone through for some time now. We're glad we are at a place now of saying we are passed. Wonderful. With the final approval by the town council. So glad for that. Another role of the Board of Education is the honor of selecting, retaining, and evaluating our superintendent. But it's more than just that. It also is important to establish a good working relationship with the superintendent. And a third role of the Board of Education is to develop, implement, monitor district policy. This policy gives direction to administration and staff and becomes the foundation for accountability. And that is what brings us here today in terms of policy. Now, we know that policy serves as a roadmap for the school district. We know that policy is a course or method of action in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. We know that policy is a breathing, living document in response to conditions. Breathing, livable document. It's not one and done. It's something that is a continuous process. But we are here today talking about the educational equity policy. Now, in terms of governance versus management, it's important to know, in terms of governance, we know that governance is the strategic task of setting district goals, direction, limitations, and accountability framework, in comparison to management, which is the allocation of resources and overseeing day-to-day operation of the district. The Board of Education operates or is guided by a governance, and we entrust our administration and staff to implement the management. Think of it in this way. For those of you, the very first time you may have rented an apartment, or maybe the first time you purchased a home, and you went to that apartment complex, and they showed you a model apartment, just the walls, the bare essentials of it, just giving you the overview kind of foundation of what potential there is in your apartment. It is up to you to select and personalize what you want in your apartment, what decorations you may want. This is a way of distinguishing between the governance, which is the model apartment, which is what we're striving to do here, and the implementation of what you want in that apartment is the management aspect of that. And we say this not to minimize or trivialize where we are, but we say this honoring a lot of the feedback we have given we received in terms of, this was not included or that was not included. Yes, we hear that and we welcome that. We thank you for that. And please know again, this is a living, breathable document, and this is just the beginning. The work has to be done. Please don't be mistaken by whatever policy is approved or not approved, but hopefully approved, that's just the beginning. It's not a one and done. And we know in terms of good governance, it's important that there is openness, transparency, accountability, responsiveness, integrity, effective collaboration. That is our role as Board of Education members in terms of implementing policy, in terms of guiding with a lens of governance. But it's up to all of us collectively here and all of you to support and implement the management of that. That is where the work is to be done. So with that, passing it off to my colleague.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to do the actual second reading of the policy and note the changes that we made as I do so. And I will also provide a little insight into why we made the changes we did and why we did or did not incorporate the feedback we received after the first reading. And thank you to everyone who took the time to offer feedback. It came from the online form that the district sent to all families, via email to us as a group and individuals, through phone calls, in-person interactions, and hard copy mail. So, okay, let's start with the title of the policy, Educational Equity. Some people suggested we swap out the word equity for the word equality, and we did not incorporate that feedback. We use the word equity intentionally because equity helps achieve equality. And, this might be a good time just it's not the best example, but it's a simple one. For people who are new to this work or who are just starting to learn about equity in an educational atmosphere, if you think back to before the American with Disabilities Act, and just to use that as an example, if you had a child in a wheelchair who was trying to access the building, to have equal access to education, but there wasn't a ramp, that child doesn't necessarily have that equal access. The equity work comes in by identifying that we need a ramp and building it. Once it's built, that child has access to the building and equal access to the education available, but also other people can use it. Small children learning to walk, people who have strollers, seniors, people who have crutches, or all kinds of people can use that. So built into the very essence of equity is strengthening. And that is really what this work is all about. It is the path and the process to equality. So the equity piece, where the work lies, is very important. So we use that word intentionally. And we invite people to keep learning with us along the way so that we can keep understanding what that means together here in our community. So in the introduction, thank you very much. If we wouldn't mind pulling that up, Dr. Haskins, thank you. People were curious about legal issues, and we were also asked to separate out sexual orientation since it's different from gender identity and expression. And in the first reading, we had the phrase ability difference in the introduction, and we were asked to expand that phrase to state more clearly that this policy includes support for our students who qualify for special education services, have a 504 plan, who may have a physical disability, etc. So this led to extensive discussion about how we could craft that language to cover all the ways one could interpret ability difference. And it became clear that it was going to be hard for us to do that in a way that was appropriate at the policy level. And there are a lot of factors for us to consider in this introduction, and it's important to note that a policy like this relates to many other policies, not just at the district level, but at state and federal levels also. So after much discussion and considering what we heard from our legal counsel, we decided it was best to use the legal language to state the characteristics that are protected by law. Now, some of these words aren't words that we are hearing on a day-to-day basis, but they are the legal definition. So we did receive feedback that this policy was hard to understand in some places, so we want to acknowledge that we do realize that this now leans even more heavily to the internal district user, but it became important for us to write it this way, so we did. And this is the revised introduction with the actual legal language incorporated. So, Ms. Wilcox, would you mind reading that for us?
Every student in the West Hartford Public Schools has the right to access opportunities and educational programs or activities that cultivate their unique gifts, talents, and interests, regardless of race, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, alienage, ancestry, disability, gender identity or expression, or any other basis protected by state or federal law. Every student has the right to an authentic feeling of belonging and safety. We acknowledge that current and historical systems of racism, privilege, and oppression impede student progress. Therefore, it is our moral imperative and statutory charge to identify and eliminate barriers and equitable practices that perpetuate disparities across student groups. As an anti-racist organization, it is our collective responsibility to ensure full, safe, and equitable participation for all students in every area of our educational programs. As a Board of Education, we have a statutory duty to implement the state's educational interest, which includes the duty to reduce racial, ethnic, and economic isolation of our students. We strive to reach these goals in the following ways.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So moving on to the sections, you're going to notice that all of the subsequent sections start with West Hartford Public Schools. That's just for consistency, so I won't mention those again. Now, there's no changes to the budget and resource allocation section. Dr. Farquharson, would you mind reading that?
WHPS will strive to allocate resources and funds to meet the needs of all students while directly targeting interventions and supports that address identified inequities and help maintain school cultures that support our mission to enhance our global community.
Thank you. So we were asked about why we chose to use the word strive in some places instead of the word commit. Here we chose strive because if we use the word commit, that would mean that we were promising that we would be able to meet every single need that every single child has 100% of the time. And we all know that no school district can promise that. Financially, it's not possible for any school to meet every single child's need at all times, and it's important that we're honest about that. Beyond that, we know that each of our kids have all kinds of needs, and schools are only one part of meeting them. We can't do it all, but we are striving to do the very best we can with what we have to work with at all times, and that we can promise. So please don't see the word choice there as something that worries you. We just wanted to make sure that we were very honest about the conversations that we need to have. Equity work is going to be a process of constant conversations and decision making, and it's just something we're going to have to talk about as we go. Okay. You don't need to change the slide because it's there. Okay, recruitment and retention. Would you mind reading this one, Ms. Wilcox?
West Hartford Public Schools will utilize innovative approaches and strive to recruit and retain highly qualified certified staff across all areas and leadership levels who reflect the diversity of our community and share our commitment to anti-racism. Deliberate investment strategies will be vital to recruit, support, and retain all educators, especially those from underrepresented racial, ethnic, gender, and linguistic backgrounds.
Thank you. We just reshaped the first sentence here and added the word recruit to the last sentence for consistency. Okay, moving on to high quality curriculum, instruction, and opportunities. There are no changes here. People had many suggestions for how we could make this area more specific, but as Dr. Thomas-Farquharson noted, we can only include things that relate to governance. But on a global note, I just want to take a step away from this particular area and talk about all of these areas in general. I want to confirm that last summer, we received many suggestions from some of our strongest equity advocates for specific policies to research, and we did research every single one of those. We read them and considered them, and many of those policies blended governance and management in a hybrid style, and that was the approach to that. Some of them used the equity policy to speak to some of their strategic plans in areas that we'll see here, like curriculum, retention, professional development, recruitment, discipline. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But some districts need to do that if they don't have other policies in place or if they don't have a comprehensive planning structure that's ongoing. So it's a starting point for them. We have specific standalone policies that speak to many of these areas here, and we did work with our EDC to identify policies that we might like to review if this one gets passed, so we can ensure that those continue to make sense in this context. But we wanted to slow that process down and do that with the community, so that's why a lot of those things aren't in here. So even though as people are looking at other policies, it might be very reassuring to see the metrics and to see the plans. They're written in plain language, and I can see why those would be very appealing. But we have a mature policy book here that goes deeper than a lot of other districts, and because of that, we have many policies that allow us to manage our district a little more easily with more clarity, and we have more tools at our disposal for accountability. So I just want to mention that when it comes to specificity, some of the accountability things people hope to hear more about, we'll address in a minute, but I do want to just address that piece globally. Dr. Farquharson, would you mind reading the curriculum area, please?
WHPS will commission resources to ensure the narratives, lived experiences, and perspectives of students from a wide variety of backgrounds are reflected in the curriculum and provide an authentic voice to reflect diversity and inclusion. In order for underrepresented students to access the full curriculum, including in the areas of arts and computer science education, students must see the value of these fields of study as central to society. Special care will be taken to ensure that students have ongoing opportunities to see their identities represented positively in the curriculum. Curriculum review teams will include educators from historically or traditionally marginalized groups.
Okay, thank you. And you can change to the next slide, please. So for professional development, we were asked to include language about bias in our policy. And this district already incorporates an understanding of human bias in its work, so we added that in this section to confirm that. Ms. Wilcox, would you mind reading professional development?
West Hartford Public Schools will design professional learning, training, and support to foster understanding of human biases, as well as the historical and systemic root causes of inequity, and offer research-based means of intentionally countering trends of predictable disparity and disproportionality.
Thank you. Okay, for family and community partnership, we were asked to change the phrase foster and maintain as it pertained to opportunities for communication. People are very interested in talking more about how we can structure communication moving forward, so we reworked that to say create and maintain, and we added in the word school to the area that clarifies that communication loop. So there'll be a lot more discussion about that when we get into our work in the coming months and years as well. Okay, so do we read community and family partnership? Dr. Farquharson, would you mind reading that, please?
Certainly. WHPS will create and maintain ongoing opportunities for communication among parent, caregiver, school, and community partnerships that honor and celebrate the strengths and assets of diverse identities and experiences to support student wellness and success. A balanced representation of home-school partnerships will help inform, identify, and address challenges encountered.
Thank you. In this section, we use the word strive, and while we wish we could promise a perfect environment where everyone would be free from bias, discrimination, and harassment, and one that promised all people would feel heard and valued at all times, we all know that we cannot promise that. Humanity is not capable of perfection when it comes to how we interact with one another, but what we can do is commit to the work of striving for it. That we can promise. We also clarify that we want to help people develop a feeling of individual ownership in our environment. We had the word possess in the first reading, and if we're really honest, we can't force someone to possess a feeling of ownership in trying to create a good community for our kids to grow up in, but we can strive to help them develop it. So there's a lot of thought in this area in particular with our word choices, and again, just having that honest conversation about what we can do to try to build the kind of environment we all want for our kids. So, environment and climate. Ms. Wilcox, would you mind reading that, please?
West Hartford Public Schools will strive to ensure that students, staff, and families are valued, respected, and heard. We recognize the ongoing need for anti-bias education to support the healthy development of each of our students. Discrimination, bias, or harassment toward any individual or group will not be tolerated, and we commit to our work in this area. We will encourage all members of the school community to develop a feeling of individual ownership of this responsibility to ensure safe and nurturing learning environments.
Thank you. Okay, for accountability, and this is our last section as part of our policy, we made one change to the beginning of this section to clarify that our district uses a process of continuous quality improvement, and we also reshaped the last sentence slightly. So for accountability here, West Hartford Public Schools, through a process of continuous quality improvement, will delineate structures, accountability systems, and metrics that enable the identification and analysis of inequities in access, opportunities, and outcomes for all students, and in particular, those groups who have been traditionally and historically marginalized. West Hartford Public Schools will collect data using equity-conscious measures to support clear reporting on goals and outcomes. So one of the things that you can see in this paragraph is that There are a lot of conversations to be had about planning and accountability, the metrics people are looking for. All of those things live within the management side of the district's work, and we are part of that accountability process. But all of the things that people are hoping to see in this are not appropriate for the policy level, which is why they're not in this. It also is better in the long run for all of us to have a continuous quality improvement process. And mature school districts who've been at this a while and who are very solid in their planning do utilize this kind of process because you can work with the data, and it's much easier for the community to follow in real time as well. So I know that that's not as satisfying initially when you see a policy like this, but you can see that this really holds a lot of accountability and specificity in it. It's just not at the policy level. Dr. Morrow and Dr. Haskins, many people are interested in what this policy looks like in practice, especially as it pertains to how we plan as a district, how we hold ourselves accountable, and how family engagement is going to be managed. So would you please speak to those areas for us?
Sure, good evening. Thank you for that detailed synthesis of the reflections of community feedback. I have allergies, so pardon me. I'm going to have to clear my throat. First, I do want to acknowledge, I want to echo acknowledgement and gratitude to our young people of the high school's DECA Club, because they are a true testament of how our work is being felt and realized. They are sharing responsibility in advancing equity, advancing outcomes and access so that there are successful outcomes that are equitable for all. So they're also a testament of our commitment to our equitable, equity-based practice and programs and policy enforcement. And we intend to do that with full transparency and integrity. So we have several existing structures and vehicles that allow for us to reflect, to set goals and objectives, to determine the best metrics, to measure, and to assess and to monitor, and to fully transparently report out on outcomes and impact that this work is having. All of those structures and measures live within our district's continuous development, improvement development plan, as well as our school's development plan. And so some examples of those include, we have a curriculum review and revision process. It is a formal process. We also have because I'm nervous because this is so important, and I know that the community cares so much about it, and we do too. So we have a professional learning and evaluation committee as well. And those are just two of our structures, but they have undergone a lot of revision, refinement, and reshaping as we've continued to build our capacity for cultural competence, and we've applied an equity lens to that, and we will continue to do that. We also have an EDC structure that holds us accountable. We have a new arm of the Equity and Diversity Council, one that supports policy and one that holds us accountable as well, and helps us with the professional learning, professional development, so that we continue to build our capacity so that we can continue to enact our equity practice and promise.
Rosina covered most of it, but I just wanted to, two thoughts sort of jumped out at me as we were going through this. One is really the work that we do in these settings makes this visible and makes this visible going forward in the reports that you hear, not only from us about curriculum and diversity, but also from our human resource department on our hiring practices and the success that we have there as well. The other piece that struck me was really going back to Lorna's explanation at the beginning of really the duties of the board and the work that you do not only in setting policy, but also the value that this work has in the budget is something that makes this accountable and makes this transparent for the public and for the town, and as well as the goals that you set through the supervision of the superintendent. So really, I think that this lives in many places, and I think that the work that we're doing, everything, as Rosina said, through the accountability processes and the checks that are set up with the EDC, through the surveys that are currently out to our community for each of the schools and how they're feeling valued and such for parents. I think that this is definitely something that is inherently seen in our district and will continue to be so.
If I could, I typically defer on policy to the board. I don't write policy. I don't get to vote on the policy. You all do. There's a couple policies that are my favorites. This represents what we do. And it's important to go through and make sure that what we do in school is backed by the elected body of a community. There's another policy that that's my favorite all-time policy. It's the controversial issues policy. And it's that the West Hartford Board of Education supports our teachers in not shying away from a controversial issue in class. And not just saying, well, we can't talk about that because some people are going to disagree. Because that's not what education is about. So the wording of this is really important, and there's a part of me that will always be blue collar. And I want to kind of put in blue collar terms as to what this means to me in school when we enact this policy. And I say enact it, continue to enact. As we've said, this isn't new work. This has been going on. Yet things come into a cultural zeitgeist when we are a split country where people say you're trying to do this. And so you hear words like critical race theory brought up at school boards across the country right now for a reason. Okay? What this is about, I can speak for myself, Rosine, and every educator in this room and in our district. We know about age levels with kids. We know that we don't try to teach calculus to kindergartners. But we also don't spend time in 12th grade talking about shapes and colors. There's a time and place for things. There's a time and place for discussions. There's a maturity level to what goes on in this. Am I trying to indoctrinate kids? You are correct. I'm trying to indoctrinate them in kindness, decency, caring for each other. That's what this policy is about. At different levels, what does it mean to live here in West Hartford? What does it mean for our kids to come to school here? What does it mean for our educators to teach them? So yes, making sure that I reach out and say, are you okay? How can I help you? And trying to indoctrinate kids in that's what this tries to do. This tries to make sure everybody knows we are welcome. Everybody. You can come here. Our schools are your home. Because for too long, too many kids, because of who they are, have not felt welcome. And that could be because of the way they treated. It could be because of systemic issues that existed. But whatever it is, we need our kids to come in and feel they're at home. Because we cannot have kids that are so worried and disgusted with their lives because of what goes on outside that we have to worry about their safety from self or others. And finally, when we get to those higher levels, we're talking about our town, our country, who we are. I think about Memorial Day. I look at Paul, I look at Mark, and we should absolutely celebrate the military, what it's done over the years. I mean, you guys left your families because the country asked you to serve the country. It's stunning to me what they sacrificed. Not to mention those, like my former student, Larry Philippon, who gave his life in Fallujah because the country asked him to, and I can still picture him from coaching him. And we should talk about what we did to liberate Normandy. We should talk about what we did to uplift villages, to uplift other countries at times of need. But we should also talk about Japanese internment. We can't talk about equality and say the United States is based on equality when it was at its inception profiting from slavery of others. And that progress meant 3/5. We have to talk about that. And what does it mean? And we have to talk about things like the Sand Creek Massacre and how we treated Native Americans the Cheyenne and the Arapaho. We certainly have to talk about the Tulsa massacre and what happened at Black Wall Street, which I'm a history major, and I don't know if you had the same experience, Jason. A history major, a master's in history. I did not know about it till 15 years ago, after my education was done. Brown v. Board of Education, we celebrate, as we should. We don't look into it. We don't talk about the notion that after Brown v. Board of Education, we did disperse students forcefully. We didn't teachers. We closed the schools. Throughout the American South, half of black educators in much of the South stopped teaching within 10 years because there were no jobs for them. We have to talk about what does that mean. The GI Bill after 1945, when soldiers came back, who profited and benefited the most from it and why? And what does that do to housing patterns? What does that do to wealth? These kids are ready to have those discussions. I'm not talking about that in third grade, but to talk about that and really look at what does this all mean. That's what this all commits us to. And making sure that we have teachers that are committed to making sure that all kids know they're safe, they're welcome. That's what equity means here. To make sure that we don't pretend that things are equal for every child, because they're not. But what it means is those kids are home here, we're going to work with them, and we're going to lift them up instead of tearing them down. So I just wanted to talk about what this means in practice, and certainly what I stand for as a superintendent.
Thank you. I think we have a motion that's been appropriately made. I don't think it needs to be seconded because it was made by the policy subcommittee. Do we have questions or suggestions for amendments? Mark?
First of all, I want to thank, again, I said this for the first reading. I sat on the policy board for many years, actually. Didn't want to do the financials, so I sat on the policy, and it was a lot of work. So I want to thank Rosina and Andy and the rest of the group. Lorna, I will say names today. Lorna, Amanda, and Liz for all the work that you guys have done. I know there's a tremendous amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I appreciate it. It doesn't go unnoticed, at least by me, and others out there should know that a lot of time is spent on these things. And having said that, I just have one maybe piece of advice, being the elder statesman on this, is that we have had a long-standing practice, and this really kind of threw me for a loop this weekend. Normally, I try to read, obviously, our booklet, and I did not know really changes were being made. I'm fine with the changes. It's just that our policy of best long-standing practice for tracking changes with bold, italics, and crossouts of how we track policies. We've done this for years. And this is the first time it's changed, and it kind of threw me for a loop because I didn't know there was being changes made because they're hard, you can't tell, because there's no line item. So if we can get back to that long-standing practice, I appreciate this was put in today, but it would have been nice to read where things were crossed out and added and things like that. So if we can just get back to that practice for the policy committee, because that's how it was always done. And if we're going to change it, let us know you're going to change it. If you're not going to change it, let's get back to what's supposed to be on and how those changes are tracked. No criticism, not at all. I just something that I think needs to be tracked as well as we go forward. So there'll be other policies, and I'd like to see if we can get back to a standard practice. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Amanda?
Yeah, I just wanted to own that one, Mark. Thank you for that feedback. You're spot on. That's my fault. When we were working on it as a policy committee, we thought we'd do it in Google Docs so that we kept updating the most everyone had access to the most updated version. So as we were incorporating all the feedback from the community, we were trying to do it up to the minute to make sure we always had a live document. And when we submitted it for printing, I submitted the document, but I should have highlighted the changes, not just for all of us to make it easier to read and understand, but so that we all had that when the community saw it posted. So I apologize. Yeah. Yeah, but
I'm
you're
not
right.
pointing fingers, and I didn't want someone to come up and admit. It doesn't, that's not my point on that. I get it, right? You know, I just wanted it to continue going forward, but you know how we italicized,
Yeah.
cross out, and then bold for changes that we, you know, so I didn't need to,
Yeah.
appreciate you coming forward.
Well,
but
no, I just want the
didn't-
community to know too that it's not just helpful for all of us, but just as if because we attached it, it would have been easier for people to kind of go back and forth. So thank you so that we could acknowledge it too.
Other questions? I have a question, and then I'm going to make a proposal for a small amendment. My question relates to the word alienage. I know that threw me for a little bit of a loop, and I'm just wondering if one of the members of the policy committee can address that
Can you go
term.
to paragraph in line where?
Oh, yes, this is in the opening paragraph. It's the fourth line, and it's one of the protected statuses that's listed. Just wondering who can provide some information on the term alienage. It's
Amanda,
just-
do you want to?
It's a little off-putting is all.
I can take that one. That's a word that we don't often hear, so I know it took all of us for a loop when we saw it. And we thought, what? Because if you Google it, you get all kinds of different interpretations. But the way that it's meant here is in its legal terminology, which relates to citizenship and immigration status. So we got that directly from our legal counsel. That's how it's interpreted in its legal wording, and that's how it's implemented here.
Thank you. Okay. So I have a suggestion for a small amendment, and it's in the recruitment and retention paragraph. And I'm going to read to you the suggestion. So right now, if you look on the screen, it says on the second line, who reflect the diversity of our community and share our commitment to anti-racism. I would like to add, and anti-bias. And then on the next line, it continues, deliberate investment strategies will be vital to recruit, support, and retain all educators. And I would like to eliminate the word all and add, and support staff. So that sentence would read, deliberate investment strategies will be vital to recruit, support, and retain educators and support staff, comma, especially those from, et cetera, et cetera. Did everyone understand those two changes? That is my motion for an amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Does anyone have any questions about that proposal or concerns that they want to express? If not, we can go ahead and vote on that amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Thank you for your support on that. Are there other suggestions for amendments? And any other, so back on the policy as a whole, as amended, are there any questions or concerns that anyone would like to bring up before we vote on the policy? Okay. If not, we are now voting on policy 1800 as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Abstentions? And the ayes have it. Thank you very much, and thank you to the policy committee, our staff, Dr. Haskins, Dr. Morrow, our legal staff. Sure there's other folks on the subcommittee that I'm not thinking of right now. And, yeah, staff attorney, and all of the members of the public who have contributed to this policy either directly in the last 4 weeks or over the last several years by providing their insight, their wisdom, and their perspective to us. Thank you so much. All right. We are now going to move on to unfinished business, item B, discussion and vote on the superintendent's contract. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education discuss and vote on a new employment agreement with Mr. Tom Moore to serve as superintendent of schools for a new term of 3 years, July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2024, and that Ms. Deb Poland, the chairperson, execute the new agreement on behalf of the Board of Education. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari. Discussion. So I'll state for the public's benefit that in Connecticut, we are not allowed to have a superintendent contract that goes longer than 3 years. And so because we always want to have Tom Moore working for us, what we do is every year we renegotiate a 3-year contract that pushes out his time with us ad infinitum, hopefully. And the board actually has met in executive session. We were able to provide Mr. Moore with valuable feedback, receive feedback from him, and in executive session, we agreed that we would have this motion at the board meeting tonight. Any further questions or comments? If not, I will try your minds on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. No one say that. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. I'm looking forward to negotiating that contract with you, Tom. We have no new business, so we'll move on to staff communications and reports and start with the superintendent's report.
3 more years. All right. Yeah, for those of you that were hoping, sorry, I'm stuck here. 3 more years. We'll be stuck together happily. So I want to, we're coming to the end of the year, and there's been a lot of great things that are going on as we begin to reopen, from proms to student events, and I know these two will talk about those events, and I'm not sure if, because it happened late today, I don't want to steal your thunder, Lily, but the boys track and field team at Hall won the state title today, the Class LL. Sorry, what are you saying? 8, yes. Just fantastic news for Hall, so congratulations to them. Also today in today's news, Andy and Gretchen brought me over the lease today for the new bookstore, and as they met, and the former Omaha Steak location right across the street will officially be the location of our new bookstore. Opening TBD. We'll give you a heads up, Ronnie. Gretchen will tell you earlier than that, but that's because she's not going to be here. A couple very important recognition awards. The Keeper of the Light Award is from Pupil Services, and there were so many unbelievable nominations this year, and the idea is that award that just keeps uplifting people. And this year, the nominations, I read them, they were unbelievable, and Gretchen provided them to me, and they were across the spectrum of educators and people that work here. And this goes to, I think, one of your points, Deb, that you just added in the amendments. The winner of the Keeper of the Light this year is Joe Bernard, the head custodian at Hall High School, which is a great testament. Joe's a great guy, and all the things written were about how if you asked Joe for something, to say, what do you need, when do you need it, how can I help you? And that kind of spirit is how he uplifts others, and has done that throughout this time when everybody knows the pressure our custodians have been under for the past 16 months. So congratulations, Joe. And then in a very difficult, we had tremendous Teacher of the Year nominees, as you know, when I read out their bios a couple weeks ago. It was announced on Thursday. Chelsea Smith, English Language Arts teacher at Bristow Middle School, is West Hartford's Teacher of the Year. And Chelsea is just one of those people that is beloved. You cannot find someone that will say something bad about Chelsea. So it is great recognition. We are very, very happy for her. And finally, in staff news, I am thrilled to announce that we have come to an agreement and hired a new department supervisor for school counseling. One of the most important positions we have in that. I'll lay out for people that one of my goals with high school kids is to be able to say to them, no, there's no reason for anybody to ever need a private counselor for as they move on to college. And I've been clear with this candidate, and we went through a long interview process, and then I met with her for 2 hours separately because this is a big job she's taking on. And Melanie Thomas from Manchester, she began her career in Manchester. Her recent leadership work includes coordination of Manchester High School's Imagine College program, in which she led equity discussions with the college and career readiness planning team so that all kids from early on can have this pathway designed as they move to college. And that was something really she spoke of so well to the members of the executive team. And when I met with her, her commitment to kids, her excitement for this challenge in West Hartford, to make sure that our school counseling department is everything that it can be in the future, and to make the changes that we need to make to help kids plan not just for college, but what are their other options and how many pathways are we able to guide them down. Not just 2 paths, not just 3 paths. How many different paths, and how are we doing that creatively to meet them where they are? So we are very excited to add Melanie, and she'll be here to be introduced to all of you. My team's going to come up and talk about summer work and preparations for next school year, which is typically kind of what I would do here in the last, so I'll defer to them. But as this is our last meeting, I want to thank all the teachers, all the students, all the staff members, all the administrators, my team, all of you for your support this year in what has been a most difficult year, but a most rewarding year. Because I'm beginning to see some of the shifts happen as we're finding people and bringing them back in creative solutions, and people are coming to me with ideas. We had a brainstorming session with the principals last week where I gave them the week's notice ahead of time, and I said, I want you all to come to me with one idea that I haven't thought of yet. And which maybe I just haven't thought of many things, but to have 16 people that have discussed with members that advised them and come forward and said, Tom, why haven't we tried this? And my promise was, as you present them, I won't tell you all the reasons why we can't do it. We'll just listen, and then we'll talk about that. And some really creative thoughts. We're going to continue that process as we go through the summer. We're going to meet with our teachers union, we're going to meet with our paraprofessionals union, we're going to meet with community groups to talk about what are those things that we have the opportunity to do with the American Rescue Plan, and how can it set us up over the next 3 years for a better future, while also keeping in mind that we want that investment in our children. We have a lot of work to do, but I know we have the right people to do it and people that are very excited to do that work. So with that, that's it for my report.
All right, thank you. We will move to staff reports and board discussions, and our presentation will be on the 2021-22 planning for the opening of schools.
Now, this is an important event. Not that the topic isn't important, because the topic is, of course, very important. You see the member of my team coming forward, our team, our West Hartford team, and this is, I guess, the official handing of the baton, in that it is Gretchen's last meeting and Melissa Caballero's first meeting in front of the board and first presentation as Director of Pupil Services. So with that, I'll turn it over to all of you as you duck down. Don't let the questioning of them getting hit in the head judge the validity of their presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to welcome forward to the table Melissa Caballero for her first opportunity to present to you as well. Our presentation, as Tom mentioned, is on planning for 21-22 summer programming in our school year. And it really highlights not just the summer programs, but school safety protocols, our scheduling, recent announcements we've made there, the reintegration of students from the remote learning environment, not to mention our ongoing work in social emotional learning, professional learning, and many other things. And if you could hit the slide. The agenda kind of maps out the big areas under which we talk, the big areas that were identified within the written report. But it also, is intended specifically so that we can address not only things that are included in the ongoing budget that we've recently put forward to you through that process, budget priorities for the coming years, but also in some ways how we're making use of federal grants such as the ESSER funds and the American CARES Act, as Tom mentioned. Slide, please. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Morrow, who will really introduce for us school safety and risk mitigation for both the summer and the upcoming school year.
Thanks, Paul. If you think all the way back until last summer, when we were here talking about how we would open the schools and such, we took some time to thank all of the people who made that possible. Our custodial staff who worked so hard over the summer, Paul Palmer and all of his people who just did an incredible job getting schools ready. And so certainly I want to thank them and really to thank everyone who made this year possible and helped keep our students in school and keep them safe. And that goes from our custodial staff to our teachers, to our bus drivers who rarely get credit, to our principals who sometimes don't get credit. But especially I wanted to call out and thank our school nurses, who we really have been sort of the unsung heroes in all of this. And I wanted just to mention them by name and thank them. So I want to, if I could indulge me for a moment, to thank Eileen McCormick, Carrie Anderson, Beth Vossler, Kathy Winook, Molly Siporas, Julie Schwartz, Kathy Condon, Gaheda Saleb, Lisa Marie Vitelli, Heidi Hobart, Glenda McKenney, Eileen Flaherty, Karen Burnett, Allison Schmidt, Melissa Wren, Megan Evgen, Angela Kolosal, Sabrina Danko, Lynn Foley, Helene Hanrahan, Tracy Cafardo, and Tracy Roberts. And especially to give thanks and credit to our nurse supervisor, Grace Johnson, who will tell you that, we kid, but I have probably spent more time talking to this year than my wife, as far as the late night calls about quarantines and cases and so forth. And Grace has just been a fantastic partner in this and will continue to be as we go forward. Some data to share a little bit. We have managed this year 450 positive cases amongst our student body and 110 additional cases among our staff members. And we have tracked with these nurses at the schools and with everyone involved, we have tracked 4,700 individuals this year who have been absent, who have been sick, who have been under quarantine. And that continues. As thankfully as we've seen, the numbers are dwindling down. Our number actually right now, if you check the dashboard and such for the past 2-week period from the state, is we are below 5. And they don't give out numbers below 5, which is kind of nice to see. And so hopefully that will continue going forward. But it really is impressive, I think, if you look at that data from a year standpoint of 4,700 cases, 4,700 individuals and families that were impacted by this and that have been managed and that have been worked with. So we're very proud of that. As Paul said, one of our goals in moving forward is to make sure that we're able to safely reopen our schools full in the fall. We continue to operate under the guidance that the state has provided. I would expect it is going to change in that they have been working under the idea that they are going to be modifying some of their guidance going forward. But what we're currently planning for, based on what our conversations with the state, is a full reopen of our schools back to our regular schedules, no block schedule as Tom has shared in the past, because again, our current expectation is that we will not need that level of mitigation and that mitigation strategy. We've always talked about, and you've heard us say many times, that we employ a suite of mitigation strategies and hand washing and block scheduling and all of that. We don't expect at the secondary level that block scheduling will be necessary. So we will have the traditional schedule. We don't expect there to be a need for any changes in our bus transportation. We expect that to be traditional, as we do for lunches and sports activities and everything else that goes forward with that. We expect at this point that we will still have to implement a contact tracing protocol and a quarantine protocol. I expect it will be different than what we're currently operating under. The state realizes that continuing what they're doing, especially at the secondary level, doesn't make a lot of sense, but at this point, they're not making changes, obviously, for the rest of the year, and perhaps they will continue this through summer school. At this point, we don't know, and we're waiting for further guidance on that. And again, as I think really becomes apparent, we'll continue our emphasis on hand washing as we've done, especially at the elementary school. We'll continue our emphasis on all of the good practices that we've put in place, our outdoor education spots. We're spending more resources over the summer to enhance those because, again, they're very popular and it's a great thing to get kids out. And we've seen that since day one and encourage kids to get outside. And so all of that will continue. Hopefully we will continue vaccination efforts. We've had great success with our 12 plus for that, and hopefully that will continue over the summer as well. So really where we're at now is we're following the guidance that we've been given, and we will continue to follow the guidance, working with the Department of Public Health, working with the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, who have also been great partners in this, and we will make modifications as needed as the summer becomes a little clearer for us.
So to not answer the question that we keep getting asked, so will masks be mandatory in the fall? We don't know yet. I mean, there's been some signals sent, there's been discussion made. My expectation is that it'll probably be, well, I don't know. I have a feeling it'll be left up to local districts, just as much of this has been left up to local districts. So we'll talk, we'll look at the numbers then, we'll talk to the experts if it is left in our hand, and then we'll make an informed decision.
Before we move on, since you asked about or referenced whether or not masks will be required, we don't have any news about vaccinations being required either. We get that question a lot. Figured I would just bring that up.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing about vaccinations. No hints that that's going to be mandatory. I mean, we see things shifting, as we know in May, how quickly things shifted previously, and as we saw our case numbers decline, so that there are things, you're looking at graduation in 2 weeks, and you're looking at a heat spell that it looks like we're going to be in the 90s for a 10 to 14 day period. And everybody's going to be outside. So it's not going to be a mask policing type of environment so things are shifting every day. Andy was on a call with the Department of Public Health this morning, and luckily there's some districts going ahead of us that are graduating a little bit earlier that I was speaking to today. So we'll see as they push the envelope on some things.
We're getting also some indications from the state and from the Department of Public Health that they are looking at differentiating between different levels. And so we may have some different requirements in place at the elementary level than we do at the secondary level going forward for next year.
Just as a note, at the CIC today, they didn't require masks for the track meet for visitors. So I was really kind of shocked by it, quite honestly, being a school event. So.
Good. I'll start off and I'll share some airtime with Gretchen on summer programs, but beginning at the elementary level with our ESOL summer prep, most of you should recall that this is a traditional program that we've had in the district for many, many years. And its purpose really is exactly what, as we think about what we're trying to do for other students in the district, that's exactly the purpose of the ESOL summer program. It services our English language learners. Not every single English language learner you're recommended into the program, but the whole point of the program is if your language proficiency is at an area where it's just blossoming, it's just beginning, if there are indications that you potentially do not have English-speaking parents at home, so there's a genuine chance for some regression of skills over the summer without additional practice, we provide a program at no cost to families serving our elementary and middle school age children. And so there are very few design changes that we felt we needed to make to this program. We are hosting the program in person. One of the things we felt strongly about is the need to have that face time with children. One of the changes was we did see the need to increase our number of classrooms by one, just based on an increase in relative student need. And then we were responsive to feedback from families who said that coming in person over the summer was going to be a challenge for them, really based on afternoon care. Because it is a half-day program. So we did open up an opportunity within this program specifically for an online classroom within rising grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I believe a combined 5, 6. But other than that, there are approximately 16 classrooms of students, so there will be at least 10 to 11 that are meeting in person, and that program will be hosted at Smith Elementary School as it's been. Second, and very similar in design, is our Summer Connections program, which again is a traditional program that we've hosted here in the district. However, historically that program was a feature specifically of our two magnet schools, Smith and Charter Oak. Again, it was a program servicing students under a recommendation basis, typically for remediation within literacy and numeracy. So students that may have had supports from a math coach or from a literacy coach during the year for whom their teachers felt they needed additional work over the summer in order to ensure their readiness in the coming grade. What we did for a change with this year, two major changes. First, we expanded the program to service students from the entire district, all right, and obviously transportation being provided. So we've more than doubled the number of classrooms that are available for that. And secondly, in terms of the spirit of what's out there for the state, we look not just at remediation, but how we can accelerate learning. So we modified the program slightly to include an exploration block within the program, something in and along an arts block that's going to really attend to not just students' literacy skills and numeracy, but their engagement with school, doing our best to try to re-engage students. We have over 200 students enrolled as of this morning for that program. Roughly 30% to 33% of those students are from our remote learning environment, as well as students from across the district. There are a total of 26 classrooms programmed currently. And then lastly, our middle and high school programs. I don't know if I gave the middle school program, which is a new program, enough description within the written report. We haven't had a middle school summer program for a number of years. We did pilot something this spring with a Saturday Goal Academy that worked with sixth graders, where we were looking at those students that were attending that were having engagement issues. And we designed a program that would have kind of a morning meeting, would have some literacy and numeracy remediation, but structured within the context of goal setting, collaboration, communication, note-taking, some of those student skills that we saw, we recognize are vital, that students were struggling with. And we built a bigger exploration block into that program as well. That's the model for our middle school summer program. Students will be grouped in small groups of between 12 to 15. They will rotate among 3 teachers, one of whom will provide them some literacy instruction, probably with reading and writing things that are really targeting more of the skills, less of the content. There'll be some numeracy work, and then there'll be an exploration block, and that can be coding, that can be visual arts or performing arts, that could be world language. It's kind of more of a school meets camp approach that we're trying to achieve. We have a total of 18 classrooms, and that's going to service rising 6th graders through rising 9th graders. And again, that's on a recommendation basis. All of our programs, all of those summer programs will qualify through state funding, state grant. They can get a free lunch to go, as well as we provide snack and transportation. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Gretchen, who will describe some of the variety of pupil service programs.
So we typically provide extended school year every year. And so students in pupil services who qualify, very specific guidelines around regression and emerging functional learning really allow and enable a student to qualify for this more comprehensive, intensive summer programming. And so per state guidance, we're going to continue that. And so every student with an IEP who would qualify in any other summer is going to continue to get that comprehensive ESY programming. And so I outlined a description of the programs that we have traditionally presented in the Whiting Lane building, as well as the Bristow building, and then the middle school and the high school will be at Conard, and then our post-secondary students will continue their learning and on their campus, their own campus, and in their own building at the Cogswell campus. And so we anticipate a little over 400 students accessing ESY this summer. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we started enhancing our single subject tutoring for students who really didn't need or qualify for a large comprehensive ESY program, but would really has demonstrated a need for single subject tutoring to make sure that they're keeping up with their skills and they are as prepared as they can be to start the new school year. And in that, this year, we expanded the number of students that will be eligible for that tutoring service. That happens in the afternoon at Bristow for 4 weeks. And so we have hired additional teachers to make sure that we have appropriately small enough class sizes, and we're probably looking at about a third to a half or 50% increase in the number of students that we are providing for tutoring, which is very positive. And then Paul, I have to say thank you very much, because when we talked about what he was going to do over summer school, I said, please make sure that we're looking at all students equally, and that our students with IEPs are also included in your summer connections and the summer middle school and high school programs. And I'm really pleased to see that a lot of our students with IEPs who wouldn't traditionally qualify for ESY services are going to be getting that acceleration, as well as reinforcement that's going to be happening through the regular ed. And so we're thrilled, just absolutely thrilled. A lot of our students are going to be touched by great curriculum, enthusiastic teachers, and continued learning for the summer.
If you look at numbers, just pure numbers that are coming in every day, during our off summer, our district will be larger than 80% of the districts in Connecticut are during the regular school year.
All right, so I'm going to transition and talk about planning for the fall for the next full school year. And the first thing that bears mentioning is reintegration activities. We do have a number of students that were attended school remotely for the entire year, and specifically of concern among them are students, say, who are in kindergarten, who are in 6th grade, or who are in 9th grade, who have potentially to this point never really set foot in the new school that they would have otherwise transitioned to in a normal progression. So we are planning very specifically with that group as an emphasis, but certainly all students with that were at the RLE to make certain that in the fall, prior to the start of school, there are specific reintegration activities programmed at the individual schools for them. And so we'll bring in some teachers. We'll be working with the principals over the summertime to kind of plan that out a little bit. But essentially the focus of those activities is certainly welcoming opportunity. It's the opportunity to walk the school, to tour the school, to meet the teachers one-on-one before the big scary first day of school. To understand at that point any protocols that are in place that they would not have seen, obviously, if they hadn't attended school all last year. And, you know, for some of our students, if I've had a foothold in a school, if I'm returning next year to 5th grade and I've had multiple years, that's not going to be as much of an issue. But for some of our children, it will be a new experience. And so that pressure of a first day will be a little bit larger. So we wanted to make sure that we had something that was both welcoming, that was, you know, appropriate, and you know, help to reduce any anxiety that folks might have as we return. And we'll have greater detail on the very specifics of those things that we'll communicate certainly to the board and to the public as those plans firm up over the course of the summer. In terms of school engagement, I'll just talk briefly and then turn the rest of this slide over to the variety of presenters here. But one of the things we're looking at are, you know, opportunities for accelerating learning. And so as we've mentioned in the past, a couple of things that we plan for within our budget. We do have our department supervisors who would have otherwise typically been teaching a course in the coming year, and we've eliminated those teaching duties for the coming year for our mathematics and our English language arts department at the secondary level, so that they can have a greater foothold kind of working across the department in those areas that we are more concerned about in terms of the supervision of high quality instruction. And any potential learning loss that students may have and their need to accelerate learning. We've also brought into the district math coach, which was something that all of you supported through the budget, but through ESSER funding, we're going to bring forward 2 math coaches at the middle school, and we're potentially planning, as we look at that ESSER 3 grant, if we'd like to do something in kind at the high school, but that grant application is as yet not due, and we're just got the application recently. Those math coaches will work directly with teachers in terms of their pedagogy. The intent is to mimic our elementary model, which we've presented to you. We think that we have a very high quality model, and it has more to do with being that set of hands and that teacher in the classroom that gets to know students than it does with strict intervention. We certainly have funding within ESSER and within our district budget to support our literacy coaches and math coaches and things like this, but our intent is really to work very directly with teachers to be able to identify and address any learning loss and any opportunities for learning acceleration. Finally, I mentioned the goal Saturday Academy at the middle school level that we piloted in 6th grade. Our intent is to continue that to help with engagement of students throughout the year at the middle school level. And just as way of segue, we are maintaining structures that we've built this year, such as advisory and community at the secondary level, obviously the morning meeting at the elementary level, so that we can continue our work with social emotional learning, our social justice. And so with that, I'll turn this over to Rosina to talk a little bit, potentially more about those efforts.
Sure. So we've reflected over the year on things that we've had to reimagine, things that have worked well, things that haven't, things that we should keep, stop, and change. And so one of the things that we continue to value are our community sessions that we offer for students to be able to really build their own social emotional learning, show empathy and kindness toward each other, but also to understand and embrace diversity and their own identity. And so that will continue to happen, as Paul said, in our community sessions, morning meeting, morning advisory, and community. Our EDC members are already planning for summer work beginning immediately when school finishes to regroup and then engage in their own professional learning so that we can support our students in going forward with pro-social education. You know, safety is our #1 priority, and so ensuring that students feel value seen in her, that is a provision of safety and wellness. So that's the work that we'll continue to do. On this slide, I'll also talk about family and community connections, because this year's equity office staffing and restructure has allowed for us to expand family partnership. We're going to continue to build on the One Community Network that we've started, so that we can bring in more perspectives to the table in diverse experiences. And then we'll continue to build our capacity for true family-school partnership. We want this work to be realized and felt, not just at the district level, but within our schools. So we're doing some deep equity work within our schools relative to family-school partnership. And we've built equity with so many stakeholders that we'll continue to capitalize on that and move our work forward.
And finally, of course, we'd be remiss not to talk to you in depth about our pupil services planning, our students who may face other obstacles, and what their educational planning will look like. So Melissa Cavallero will be leading that work next year. Very excited to welcome her.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And I just want to thank Gretchen for her partnership in preparing for next year. She holds a lot of this information. I really appreciate her leadership and guidance in helping me see the vision that she has started in moving our work forward. But as we get ready to welcome students back to a more traditional year next year, we certainly know that there has been some disruption for some of our students. And we've seen that through our data and the feedback we receive from parents. And so we want to be proactive in our approach in providing support. And so we're looking at adding additional staffing elementary through the upper grades to ensure that our students are well supported in their return back to school. And so that looks like the addition of additional staff members in the world of clinical to support their needs at the elementary level, including 3 additional social workers, an AIM curriculum, which is a social emotional curriculum, training for the entire elementary clinical team to support not only students who have individualized education plans in the reacclimation process, but all students, so that our clinicians are ready and prepared to support students as they return in supporting them as they reacclimate. At the secondary level, we have additional staff joining all of our middle school and high school buildings to support both academic and social emotional learning. And we have an additional clinician who will be supporting Pat Tyler's work in the crisis and trauma field. We also, in that same partnership, want to be providing parents with resources, tools, and community agencies. So we will be updating our website to include important information for families who are seeking to find additional resources as they also reintegrate back into a more traditional school year and are supporting their students in the home. We did receive guidance last week on Thursday from the state regarding recovery. And so new information, we're still processing it, but the state has provided some guidance on how we can look at recovery services for students who've experienced disruption to their learning that has caused a lag in their ability to progress as they have typically done so. So we're processing that information. We'll be putting together procedures for the fall for us to look at students we feel are eligible, and certainly we'll be communicating with families who might see that their child has had difficulty over the past year and a half given the COVID situation. So we'll partner with families on recovery services, which are not minute by minute. However, they are a short-term recoupment for students to get back to where they should have been had there not been a pandemic.
So with that, we'd open it up to any discussion or questions.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive report. I assume we do have questions. I'll look around at my colleagues. We'll start with Mark and then Jason.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate this. I think my obituary is going to say that we have slide packets in front of us when I. This is fantastic. I'm just a little kid in a candy store with this. But anyway,
or later.
So thank you. And first, Gretchen, I want to wish you a happy retirement. I remember that your first day you were here, and you know, I know you've got grandkids and things to look forward to, and so enjoy. You've been a welcome addition to West Hartford, and I appreciate it. So thank you, and welcome as well. And I'm sure you have big shoes to fill, but I have no question that you can fill them easily. So thank you. You know, the one thing I have on this is, you know, for every bad situation or negative occurrence that we encounter, cloud always has a silver lining. And I would like us to look back at all that we did in the past year plus. What and how can we take advantage of those learning environments? You know, if someone were to be, say, sick for an extended period of time, but not so much that they couldn't sit in front of a computer, and for whatever reason, and it was a board, and I guess as a state, we can talk about eventually snow days, maybe every other one or something like that, because, you know, we went through a sharp learning curve, and we got there, right? And we did well, and I wouldn't want to lose that, I guess. And I think there's a way, there's an opportunity, there's a silver lining that we could take advantage of some of those things. You know, I just remember one of my son's friends went to Spain for an extended period of time, like 2 weeks or something, for a family vacation, for family occurrence or something happened. And there was nothing he could do. He had to make up the time and things like that. And I was like, well, you know, if we had that online piece, you know, and I don't mean recreating it all together. You know, I know in some rooms we just had a camera, right? And that said student could get into that camera and look at those classes so they don't fall further behind. I don't know what the solution is, but there are creative solutions out there for what we went through for the last year and a half, and I wouldn't want to lose it. You know, there are ways that we can take advantage of it, and I just hope that we're looking at all that. So,
thank you for that, Mark. And there is a comment that I failed to mention. I put the bullet in there, but then forgot to talk about it. One of the things that we're looking at within our high school summer program this year, and students that typically attend summer program attend for one of two reasons. They're either remediating a credit that they lost due to whether that be attendance or academic failure, or they're accelerating and trying to get ahead in their credit to free up some room in their schedule for other courses. So while we feel strongly that for the summer program, if students remediating, we really want them to be kind of face-to-face and in front of us so that we can address their individual needs and get a quicker understanding of that. We did implement online classes at the high school level for get ahead credit, and we're also trying to offer those at, you know, non-routine times, something in the later afternoon. We'd love to be able to get into the early evening, kind of that something where we assume students would be able to still do some of the things they want to do during their daytime, and then maybe, you know, have that opportunity to take a class. So that is actually an effect that didn't make it into the board report. That's my fault. Other thing that definitely is a takeaway in terms of the instruction and the pedagogy across all grade levels is hopefully, number one, that use of Google Classroom. So it really was a jump start to make sure that kind of all of our teachers could get more proficient just in that basic tool, which is a great tool for warehousing your student assignments, organizing what things are due. I'll gladly, you know, let our student reps either talk to the power of that tool or potentially, you know, their disdain for it. I'm not sure which that might be, but we are also looking at introducing that tool. Currently we do that down to the third grade level, and we're looking at finding the opportunity to be able to introduce that down in the second grade level, because we're finding that the teachers were clamoring for it, the students were clamoring for it, and it is, you know, it's a logical step for us in terms of being able to build some of those keyboarding skills at that age, 1 year prior to their introduction to the state testing platforms, which, as you know, are all online as well. So those are some quick lessons learned, but absolutely, Mr. Moore, Dr. Morrow are talking with me and my team about what are some other opportunities for some of that online learning, some pieces where you look at something like Conard has that automotive wing, but Hall doesn't have that. How can we arrange, or other low incidence, high interest classes, but you just don't have density at a school to always be able to run it? How can we share a staff member that can teach a week at one building and then teach a week at the other building, and the students remote in on the off week when the teacher's not standing in front of them? So that's an ongoing conversation, things that we're looking at. What are the lessons learned that we can take away and bring forward into the coming school years?
Awesome. I'm just going to take a minute to say I love that idea of the non-traditional hours for the high school students who are looking to take classes to get ahead. I can speak for just our own experience and those of people that we know. And a student in that situation in the past has had to decide whether typically to have a summer job or to be able to take these classes, or sometimes even miss a sports practice. So this is great. Thanks. Jason.
Thank you. I just want to extend my gratitude to everyone for this incredible year. And, as a newcomer to the board, it's been incredibly humbling to sit here or at home and witness all of the work that has happened in this district. And I'm just incredibly proud to be here to support the work that y'all are doing. And I also think that this is, really fortuitous tonight to have this reopening plan that you presented combined with the conversation voting in our new equity policy, because I see equity all over this reopening plan. And I think, it demonstrates, if people want to know what this policy looks like, it looks like this reopening plan. The ability to be, to empower the district to be curious about students and families, to find out what their needs are, and to generate the resources and the expertise to meet those needs is just tremendous. And, I try to think of what, like the most transformative educational experiences I've had. If you could just imagine the teacher that you had that experience with. That you didn't have that experience because you were treated exactly like everyone else, right? The importance is to be able to see individuals and to be able to put them in a context. And so, I think when I see the work that's happening here, and then today in the State House passed SB 1, which declares racism a public health crisis, the ability for us to see those disparities and to be able to meet them in our public institutions is so important. And so I'm really grateful, and I see that sensitivity to those conditions in the reopening plan. And so I'm incredibly grateful for those insights and the expertise you bring to thinking about these things, because I can see reopening being just as difficult as the going remote last year in March. There's a number of challenges that are going to require us to be equitable, and those are going to we're all going to benefit from that, and I'm just really grateful, so thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ari?
I first want to just thank each and every one of you for keeping our schools up and running during this pandemic. I still tell everyone I don't think any of you have slept since March 2020, and you look awfully good. So I just want to thank you for that. I feel that West Hartford was really kind of the trendsetter in all of the patterns with regard to the pandemic, first to close, first to open. Like, I just think the work that you guys have done is remarkable. So I just first want to thank each and every one of you, including Tom. Gretchen, I just wanted to say I'm really sad to see you go. I've enjoyed working with you over the years. So I hope you enjoy retirement and all that comes with it. And Melissa, I look forward to getting to know you and working with you in the upcoming years. So I had one clarification question, and then just another actual question. So the Summer Connections program for middle school is for regular education students, correct? That's not a pupil service program.
It's open to all students unrecommended, so it's not only for regular education, as Gretchen mentioned.
Okay.
Special education students may attend, but
right.
it's not extended school year, so it's not designed, in terms of the recommendation process, if I'm a student with disabilities and I would qualify for extended school year, there's specific criteria that
Right.
Gretchen has. If I'm just a struggling learner, whether I have that identification or not, I may have been recommended into the middle school summer program.
And then my follow-up question for that is, given that it's a teacher recommended program, and in middle school they have number of teachers, is it kind of a consensus? Is it just one area that a teacher could recommend?
Sure. They had conversations at the team level based on looking at students that may have had either engagement or achievement slumps throughout the year and some degree of consistency of need. And then they set priorities, kind of high, moderate, low priority for students.
Okay.
And just one clarification, so students who receive ESY programming, we primarily work on their IEP goals and objectives, whereas students with an IEP who would be included in Summer Connections are working on general curriculum, not their individualized IEP goals and objectives. It's very important to make that distinction.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was more about fall planning and reintegration activities. I'm wondering, what are the options for students and their families if they're not comfortable coming back to in-person school, and they're not comfortable returning to in-person, in terms of, are there measures that will be taken to kind of help reintegrate or increase their level of comfort to come back to school? And then, obviously, if that can't be achieved, what are the options for those families in the fall?
I can talk specifically to students that we work with in pupil services.
It's probably better, let me start with
All right.
and then go to the mitigations. Overall, we believe children need to be in public schools. We believe children need to be in school. And that we're going back to the system prior to pandemic, that your comfort level may make you search out something else, but we're going back to the public school setting in the way that we're providing an education for everybody. The state of Connecticut on the side may be and is developing a online learning platform of some sort that isn't all completely out to us yet, so I'm not sure what it is. And there's a lot of questions that go with that then. If they provide this platform, is that student now a student of the state? Are they withdrawn and a homeschool student and they're a student of the state, or are they still a student of West Hartford Public Schools? That hasn't been delineated yet, and I know that there would need to be a large legal component to that too. So that's kind of the big picture in terms of, okay, we believe students need to be in school. Here's what we're going to be able to do. So then I'd go through the components of how do we reintegrate that, both for those that will have some difficulty, be it nervousness, be it anxiety, be it all of those elements.
So I think, Paul, you're definitely working with your teams on reintegration kinds of plans and reacclimation for all students, right?
Correct. And so that, in terms of the piece that I mentioned, we'll plan for something prior to the opening of school. And some of that, it's getting inside the building, meeting the teacher, understanding, being able to walk around the classroom, understand how, what it looks like. But as you know, within our budgeting process, we have class size guidelines. We're trying to operate under those guidelines in the coming year. We don't expect we're going to have the same level of intensity on all of the risk mitigation factors that we have, but we have, we can talk to parents and you can have that face-to-face conversation and you can talk about, in real time, the low incidence rate and try to, provide that greater level of comfort for, obviously, school safety is the number one thing in education. It's ahead of reading, it's ahead of literacy, it's ahead of everything. And we wouldn't be reopening if we didn't feel places were safe. So some of that baseline reintegration is to try to provide the opportunity to have that one-on-one conversation with a parent, try to work on that credibility of that message with them, allowing them to kind of see the grounds. From there,
In pupil services, everything is individualized. I mean, that's the I in the IEP. And so we've also worked traditionally with students and families who have health concerns that don't allow them to come into a school building safely. And so we will work within those parameters of individualization and health concerns to make sure that all students' needs are being met, whether they have an IEP or not. And so we're able to work with a few families this summer who have some concerns and have some documented medical concerns. However, they're very few. And so all of our programming is going to be done in person. And so at this point, we're anticipating, again, all of our programming is going to be provided in person, but we'll work with each individual family if a need arises.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Lorna?
I'll be brief. I just wanted to, again, echo what my colleagues have shared and just want to extend appreciation to all of you for us even being in this position to talk about reopening for next school year. And I say that because of your steadfast diligence and dedication to following the North Star, being committed to following guidelines and recommendations, but certainly being committed to wanting to get back to this place. So thank you for your, as the young folk, say, just keeping it real and just being hard about it and just focused and all of that. I digress, but I certainly do thank you for that. I also thank you, Andy, for sharing and reading all of the names of the nursing staff. I recall you doing that last year with all of the custodian staff, and I held back tears then, and I held back tears this time as well, because it certainly recognizes how everyone is a part of our system, and certainly having had many conversations over the years with nursing staff, yes, we certainly value them. So thank you for taking the time to read each and every one of their names. And just again, thank you to all of you. Gretchen, wishing you well as you start a new chapter in your life. Don't like to say goodbye, just say see you later. But certainly you're passing it off to someone who's well received. So welcome, Melissa. Again, look forward to collaborating with you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Amanda?
Oh, thank you, and I echo all of my colleagues' sentiments. Thank you, Gretchen. And welcome, Melissa. We know you're ready. As we start looking at some of the pieces for going into next year, I saw something online the other day. A teacher friend of mine wrote, I hope everyone as parents remembers that teachers are not on break this summer. They're recovering. And I laughed when I saw it because I thought that is so true. But then I thought, I don't think they're recovering because they didn't have, I don't know if people really have a sense of everything that went on in this district last summer, and at every single person in every single position of the district was working at max capacity nonstop and really hasn't stopped since. That there really haven't been recovery periods. And so it got me thinking about how people really don't know what this summer is going to look like. I certainly feel like I have more of a front row seat because of the health district piece that we share, to Andy's work, and then Rosina, to your work, because we're in close contact about that through policy. But could you help us understand, for the community too, kind of what is summer going to look like for the teachers and for all of you? Thank you for your stamina, because we know that this is going to be an intense summer. We can hear all of the planning that's going on, but it just might be good for people to just get a sense of what that's going to look like, because at all levels, there's really no break.
Sure. I'll try to start, and I'll welcome any other comments. So First and foremost, I wish I could spend time reading the names of every teacher. The commitment of the teaching staff, the paraeducators, of everyone in this district this year is nothing short of commendable, and I would be remiss if I didn't just open my comments with a gigantic thank you for all that they've done. I know that many of them, I'm certain all of them, are greatly looking forward to the opportunity to simply exhale after June 17th. That being said, there are a number of staff. We talked about summer opportunities. We talked about summer school and trying to build and expand on our summer programs. And there was a lot of talk like, will people come? Will teachers want to work? And we do have a number of folks that are very passionate, very excited about it. This whole new middle school program that we've developed, there's a dramatic amount of energy from the folks that applied into that program because they really see the opportunity. While they may want to be able to take some time and refresh and recharge, they see an opportunity for something that they really want to do and an investment in children that they think will pay dividends. So between the ESY program, all the extended summer programs, there are a number of staff that will continue to work in those programs. We have a number of curriculum writing teams and projects in equity work in our content areas, new courses that we highlighted. Potentially there weren't that many new courses this year, but in the budget process, we've got that new state course on African American and Latin studies that we'll be offering, and there'll be a curriculum team that assembles to do that. So there's work, and then there's work I'm sure that Rosina and others will describe. But by and large, there's downtime for teachers as well. We're also looking at a variety of professional development opportunities that we can offer for teachers over the course of the summer. And one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic, to go back to kind of Mark's comment earlier, is there are a number of department supervisors, not the least of which I should thank Jocelyn Tamburillo and Lisa Daly, who have worked to warehouse a number of our professional development workshops that we've offered over the course of the year, put them up online to have an on-demand, anytime professional learning repository that others will be contributing to this summer. We talked before the pandemic about computer science. Jackie Coricelli is offering a kind of a computer science boot camp for educators, doing one at the elementary level, one at the secondary level. That's going to happen over the summer. So there's certainly no shortage. I don't know if anyone has things. I don't know if that addresses your question, but there's also opportunities for people. Some of this, individuals will select into the things that they're willing to do. Individuals select into summer school. It's not a requirement. They ask to, they apply to. All of the programs that I was describing in the ESY program, teachers apply into that to teach. Teachers volunteer to work on the summer curriculum projects, and then other teachers take time to be with family, take time for themselves, which well deserved.
The irony, Amanda, of the single most avowed workaholic I've ever known in my life, replying to your question about how people will take a break. But I think it's important. I want to use Paul as an example here. Paul's not energized unless he's doing something. I mean, and that's the case. So we didn't assign any teachers to come in during the summer. We didn't beg any teachers to come in during the summer. We posted this and said, you're welcome to. We're not assigning that professional development. We're saying you're welcome to come in, because every person has that different kind of need of what energizes them, of what gets them going. What do you read? What do you watch? What do you experience? And for some people that can be time at the beach, and other people it can be a documentary that they watch that all of a sudden gets things going. So we want to be respectful of that with all of our staff, with our principals, and make sure that they get that time to reboot. And part of that reboot is really, and you touched on this, recentering how we think about next year and recentering this kind of thought of getting through. There's a countdown, certainly. Okay, so once that countdown ends, June, July, August, okay, what during those weeks are we not counting down to? How are we reframing next year? and being excited for that return to school. I think that's really important. One of the key elements you're getting to there. So.
I did have one other question about the kids. You know, at the beginning, thinking we can hear the dedication from all of your comments of the faculty and staff at all levels. And early on, there was a lot of personalized outreach to the kids and families, whether it was through food or through other kind of human service needs that the community at large didn't necessarily always hear about for privacy reasons, to be respectful. But when we think about some of our kids who weren't able to engage as much as others, I remember some of them needed to stop doing a lot with school because they needed to work to support their families, and that was a very real concern for them. Did you see a lot of the kids who weren't able to engage as much for a whole host of reasons? Was it spread evenly among ages, or did you find it more with the older students or the younger students? Just thinking about, you've got a lot of layers here to try to catch and re-engage the kids. Do you have a sense of if there are a lot of kids we haven't caught, or if they're the older kids versus the younger kids?
Yeah, I'll start. I know Gretchen has a piece, certainly, as she oversees some of the homeschool planning parts of that. I had a great conversation with Susie Sinatra, who's our elementary principal for the remote learning environment. She was talking about we were talking about the number of kids that were challenged with engagement throughout the year. And one of the things that we ended up doing at one point, if students, specifically in the remote environment, were having trouble attending, and likewise on the other end, if students who said they were coming to school were not showing up to school consistently, we performed outreach to say, look, we need to change something. We've had multiple interventions, we've had multiple house visits, we've tried to put certain things into place, and if this isn't working, we don't want this to be lost time for you and your family in terms of your child's education. So we may have had some hard conversations with folks and talked about switching that assignment, whether it be a movement into the RLE or a movement away, and that seemed to satisfy some degree of needs. But there were still some students, in talking with Susie, she was describing a child where she had to make just a weekly phone call to the child every Thursday afternoon, and be that adult voice that was going to run down and see how was school progressing that week from the child's perspective, what goals were they going to set. And even to the point where at some of her meetings, she told me she was driving around to houses to deliver prizes from a recent meeting, just whether it was most improved attendance or whatever it might have been, to try to build that incentive. So it's certainly been a struggle. In terms of how well distributed it is, I can't say that I can quote you numbers in terms of this many at this grade level or at these schools, because it happened in pockets, and there were certainly places where a particular grade or a particular school might have had a collection more than another, but a lot of those were due to individual circumstances. And I'll say this much: I'll say that no school was immune from it. There was need everywhere. But a lot at the root cause, in talking with both Tim and with Susie, a lot of it just had to do with some of those family dynamics, some of those issues that cropped up. If mom and dad, had to work, or didn't have that kind of time that they might need to invest with a child, specifically if that child they were not able to put them at the school to where they could kind of provide that handoff to the school personnel to take charge of their family and take care of them, if they had to be in the care at home and try to receive that education. It was just difficult with some home scenarios to provide that structure. But by and large, at the end of the day, I think Susie said, in terms of retention and things of that nature, there were 3 that she were aware of at the elementary from the RLE, and 2 additional that may have been retained. So those metrics to me tell me that there was a degree of success in re-engaging the majority of learners. But I know that Gretchen can speak to some folks.
Just on pure numbers, before you go to Gretchen, because I am curious, but certainly being remote learning doesn't mean that you're disengaged. But we've seen that excitement about coming back. I've spoken to leaders of districts that have not had the return, even in the high school when they've moved out, where kids just stayed away. Just in our official remote learning number of students since we've reopened, all year I've said we're 16 to 17% remote. That's been consistent all year long. Liz just gave me the June 1st numbers today. We're at 12% now. And that's with us saying, you're probably better off staying with that teacher. You're probably better staying off those classes. Yet we've still seen 25% of our kids come back in the past 5 weeks. So there is this kind of, as people see this re-engagement, there is a clamoring to come back. So while I am concerned about the people that are very nervous, and there's going to be that population, I think the untold story is how many people are excited to be back to normal also.
Just say briefly, in pupil services, we've had concerns about engagement and often in a student's ability to engage because of their disability in an online format, especially early on. And so, this really falls into two lanes. Students that we've kind of kept an eye on, we know that they're there, but engagement is difficult. And then students that we kind of lost, our eye on them, and we weren't quite sure, where they went. And so in the first category, we were able to really get engagement going over the course of the year, especially in thanks to all the building principals for expanding what we called the Purple Group. And so when we were putting our cohorts together for students with IEPs who qualified for that more intensive programming, that we saw a huge jump in engagement when we were able to expand that Purple Group of students who really were able to get in every single day to get the instruction that they needed. That was the first part. The second part, which I thought was interesting, is we track in our office the number of families who request homeschool paperwork. And so we've seen some trends over the years that it's slowly increasing. But last year we had 19 requests for homeschooling. This school year we had 55. And so that was a pretty significant jump. But I'm really pleased to be able to tell you that 9 of those 55 students re-enrolled over the course of the year, and that we've been notified by 15 additional families that they will definitely be re-enrolling for next year. So that kind of brings us back to the number that we had in 1920, which is very good, and another great sign of people feeling more comfortable and wanting to be here. So that was a very positive trend.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Moving on to routine matters, and our first item is the financial report. The recommendation is to approve the financial report for the period ending April 30th, 2021. And I will turn this over to my colleague, Mark Zadanowitz, to provide the financial report in partnership with Liz Hewitt.
All right, thank you. So as far as the general fund goes and salaries, if you could turn to page 17 in your booklet, I'll kind of go by line item about some of the numbers here. So if you look at teacher salaries, line 5112, a slight savings of $150,000, and that's just supervisors there, I think it is. And then right below that, 249,000, 2 libraries that are working in classrooms. So we see a savings there. And then if you go down to the next item down, 250,000, graphic designer retired, and there really has been no after-school activities with that as well. So there's a savings there too. If you skip 2 lines, go down to the 125 for the custodian regular. There's 1 vacancy in there, and we're seeing a savings. And then if you go down 2 more lines, 154, the maintenance regular again, or that was a custodian regular. This is the maintenance regular, sorry. And then we have 2 maintenance missing there, so there's a savings there. If you go down to teacher substitutions, 5180, we see $500,000 having troubles getting subs, given the times that we have. And same with the teacher's assistants, the $250,000 there too. So we're looking at a balance of $1,816,000. If you go down to the next, no real changes here. This is the unemployment and Social Security, $50,000 on Social Security, given that we're not having those teachers above employed. So for the total benefits, the next line, if you look at the $750,000, what that is really, it's a savings on pupil transportation, no field trips, outplacing students. They're using remote, so we're seeing that as well. And then if you look at the $150,000 for special ed, professional teacher services, that's for special ed. And then if we go down to supplies and maintenance too, if we went back to supplies and maintenance, we see $828,000. We've more supplies that we needed, about $200,000, and we had to buy some computers, devices, Chromebooks, and servers, which is about $500,000. So that's why that number represents that as well. Special funds report, not a lot of changes there. In fact, no changes from last month at all. And then if we go into our nutritional services, you'll see in April in that first line, the bottom one, we were showing a profit of $67,000. It was $67,197, which is good news. Our per meal reimbursement is up since January 1st. And school's back in full and lunches are up. So that's a good thing. And then if you look at the operating loss income, about 3/4 of the way down the page, $331,000. As you remembered, we are going to offset that number with the ESSER II funds of $350,000 and offset that it will make it whole. So that concludes that piece. Obviously, pending any questions that you may have, or Liz, if I missed something that you can add.
Yep, thank you, Mark. Liz, can you just give everyone a brief update about the various grant funds that have either been approved or are in the process of being approved, or applications are coming soon?
Certainly. As you may recall, during the current year, we've already received our ESSER 1 grant, which we used to fund teacher positions. That was $900,000. And we also received a $1.2 million coronavirus relief fund grant, which we used really to get our schools in shape and to buy our PPE and to fund some of our certified nursing assistants to make sure that our schools were safe for students and staff to return. Subsequent to that, we were notified of an ESSER 2 grant in the amount of $4.3 million. We applied for that and received award notification in mid-May. Those funds will start to be used over this summer and then for the next 2 school years. The only thing that we'll be doing this year with those funds is, as Mark alluded to, is reimburse our nutrition services fund $350,000. The next funding that we're receiving is called the ARP ESSER grant, or the ESSER 3 grant. We've been notified that our allocation is $9.7 million. You may recall that at one point the estimate had been $10.3 million. That was a preliminary estimate, but based on the amount that state of Connecticut actually received and our portion thereof, West Hartford will receive $9.7 million. The application just became available for that and is due in mid-August. Has a very similar framework to ESSER 2. It really is based on the same structure as that, has the same priorities, and we're working through now our application and our plans for those funds. The ESSER 3 grant is available for 3 school years, so it'll be available through 2024 school year.
So just in context, so like the ESSER 3, we anticipate that's where we would use the pay for play would come out of that over those 3-year period. And so we got 9.7 million. The town got how much? And
So
that-
the town received directly approximately 25 million, but then they also are receiving what's called a county allocation, because since Connecticut does not have counties and most states do, the state, I believe, still got that allocation, and it'll be distributed on a per capita basis. I don't have the final figure. I believe it's about 10 million.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate your giving us that context, because since our financial report only goes up through April 30th, not all of that is included, and since this is the last meeting of the year, we won't have that information. Great. So can we have a motion to approve the financial report?
So moved.
Thank you, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Any further questions about the financial report?
I just wanted to add, Deb, since you had mentioned that this really only goes through April, just as a reminder that at your second meeting in September, we will go through the financial results of the entire school year. At that point in time, we'll have more information regarding the ARP ESSER ESSER 3 grant, and we'll be able to walk you through that as well.
Which will actually be the first meeting because of the Jewish holiday when we would have our first meeting. So
Right.
the second
first
meeting
meeting.
is the first meeting.
Yes.
And with that, will be our application, the first stages of it are June 23rd, when our reopening plan will post online and get feedback for it. The truth is, that's a function for those states that haven't reopened yet. I mean, our reopening plan is kind of what we've been doing the past 2 months, except maybe more open. And then August 20th, August
It's mid-August, I believe August 16th.
August 16th is the file. So we'll be getting some feedback. Like I said, those ideas about what are some unique things we can use this for. With the idea being we want to be a little more general so that a year from now we can pivot if we need to.
Great, thank you. Are we ready to vote on the acceptance of the financial report? Okay. All those in favor of approval of the financial report, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving to approval of the minutes, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the May 18th, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Amanda. And a second? Second. Thank you, Liz. Any questions or discussions about the minutes? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to information and reports. Board members, communications and reports. Are there any reports from other boards and organizations? No other information and discussions at this time. Moving to non-staff communications and reports from our student board representatives. And Lily, we'll start with you this evening.
Thank you. Hall's athletic teams are nearing the end of their seasons as state tournaments begin. The track state championship meet was today, and results have come in throughout the afternoon. And I'm excited to announce that the boys track team of Hall is the Class LL state champions this year. Certainly not the first time that they've won this achievement, and I think that's a testament to how the strength and the spirit of that program. Baseball is hosting their first round of states tonight, and boys lacrosse and volleyball will have their first round tomorrow. Softball is advancing to the second round of states tomorrow night, and girls tennis went to the CIAC quarterfinals this afternoon. Girls golf won the CCC tournament last week for the third year in a row, and will continue on to the state championship. Even as the year comes to an end, the theater department has been busy with many different performances and activities. Fictional Character Day for students in specialized performance studies occurred last week. Students dressed as various fictional characters, including Willy Wonka, the Wicked Witch of the West, Rapunzel, and many more, and spent the day in character interacting with their peers. Additionally, Hall's improv troupe, The Answer, will be hosting their first and only in-person show all year on Thursday. It is free to attend and will occur outdoors outside of Hall. Senior prom occurred last Sunday, and there are still a few more events left in the year to celebrate the class of 2021. A car parade for seniors will take place on the evening of Sunday, June 13th, and graduation itself will take place on the following Tuesday on the turf. Students' families may sit in socially distanced pods of 4 on the turf, and additional guests can stand in the bleachers or in the area surrounding the stadium. In case of any severe weather, the rain date for graduation is June 16th. We are currently in the process of selecting next year's student representative for the Board of Ed. Juniors have been emailed about this opportunity, and interested students can submit a brief essay of why they believe they are a good fit for the role. Next week, a committee, which includes myself, will interview the applicants and make a final decision, and I'm sure you will be notified as soon as that decision is made. And finally, I want to give thanks to the West Hartford Board of Education, Superintendent Moore, and Hall Principal Mr. Zatoun for my experience over the past year. I'm so grateful to have represented Hall at the board meetings this year, and I'm so honored to be able to voice my student body's questions, concerns, and especially their accomplishments. I've learned so much about the hard work and dedication that it takes to run a school system, especially during a pandemic, and have gained even more respect for the educators who have devoted their lives to teaching West Hartford students. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Rochelle.
This past week, Conard students wrapped up AP exams after a month of testing. And for the senior, the month was capped off with a senior prom where 200 Conard seniors took part in prom at the Farmington Polo Grounds. While Mother Nature did not cooperate with the cold weather, my peers were very grateful for this opportunity to have this once-in-a-lifetime event. Spring sports have gone well for Conard and are wrapping up as the school year draws to a close. Conard has and will be running several equity focus groups. 2 staff focus groups have already taken place, and tomorrow and Thursday student focus groups will occur where senior input is especially valued. Parent focus groups will take place next year. Mr. Duarte and the Conard staff look forward to hearing the conversations and the feedbacks that come out of these focus groups to help the high school foster a more equitable environment. Insight from the focus groups will be used to design future lessons planned in the community block, and foster further classroom discussion. Tonight is the Conard National Honor Society induction ceremony, where current Conard juniors will be inducted into the ceremony, or will be inducted to be part of next academic year's National Honors Society. Last Thursday, Conard seniors picked up the graduation cap and gowns, and tomorrow, Conard seniors will be receiving their yearbooks and also have a chance to get them signed tomorrow outside. Tomorrow evening is the Senior Conard Award Ceremony, where 140 students have been selected to receive awards. The award ceremony is live for the students and can be streamed online for the parents to watch. On that note, I would like to thank the Board of Education, Mr. Moore and Mr. Duarte, for giving me the opportunity to experience something that so few are able to enjoy. I've learned what it takes to keep the schools running, and what it takes for students to be in school and to learn and form bonds with teachers and friends, especially in a year like this one. I'm so incredibly thankful for all of my teachers and the staff at Conard and across West Hartford Public Schools for their dedication and hard work this year. It was so amazing, but unsurprising, but still amazing to see how quickly my teachers adapted to the situation this year, to see teachers who have been so used to teaching on the whiteboard to all of a sudden quickly adapt to teaching and using PowerPoint slides and sharing their screen was so amazing to see, and I'm so grateful for their work. And to be able to engage students online and in person at the same time was quite masterful. I'm also so incredibly proud of my students, my peers, and my classmates for their work this year, to have learned so much in a year like this one, both in the classroom and through experiences with everything that's going on in the world. It's quite amazing, and this year is a year where it's easy to just give up, but to have persisted and to have lessons learned like independence, but also compassion and empathy, and really understanding people, and this idea of togetherness are lessons that we all can really bring with us in the future. Again, I'm so grateful for the Board of Education and for giving me this opportunity, and I'm honored to have contributed to it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure I speak for my colleagues around the table when I express our gratitude to the both of you for your commitment to representing the student voice, which is so important for us to hear. I mean, we aren't in the schools every day. We aren't talking to students every day unless we happen to live with them. And to have you representing the voice of the students at the schools has been incredibly valuable for us. And the fact that you've been able to be so nimble about like, oh, this board meeting's going to be online. This one's in person, but it's on the 4th floor and you have to wear a mask. Now we're on the 3rd floor and you can sit over there and now you can sit here. We're just really grateful to have you with us. And so on behalf of the board, Lorna is going to bring you a small token of our esteem. So thank you. Best wishes moving forward.
Thank you.
And you can take your name tag too.
Oh, they get to take the name tag? That's the best part.
Thank you.
You can put that right on your dorm room door next year. Actually, don't do that. I don't think it's a good idea. All right. Future business, announcement of our future meeting dates. As Mr. Moore indicated, our next meeting, barring any special meetings that come up over the summer, which I can pretty much guarantee there'll be at least one. But our next regularly scheduled meeting is Tuesday, September 21st, right here in Town Hall at 7 p.m., followed by a meeting on Tuesday, October 5th, also at 7 p.m. Are there requests for future agenda items? Tell us how the school year is going. We don't have any new visitors who have signed on for public comment, so I do want to just take a moment and, this has been a really unusual year. And so many of my colleagues have already expressed their gratitude towards the people in our community and our staff, but I just want to be sure to add my thanks as well. First to Tom, Andy, Paul, Rick, Gretchen, and Liz. You have led the team so strongly this year. You've been such great role models for the staff, but also for us and for families in the community and just members of the community. And I've learned so much from all of you. I know the rest of us have as well. And just so proud to have you leading our district. Also, of course, want to thank the teachers, our administrators, and all of the other support staff in the buildings, which, from the time you walk into a school building and you meet the people who work in the front office or the security staff who are there to make sure that you are appropriately in the building but also feel welcomed. I mean, that is a tough balance. Our school nurses, our occupational therapists, our speech language pathologists, our physical therapists, our TAs and paraprofessionals. I know I'm leaving some folks out, but our custodians, you get the idea. This is truly a team effort, and I want to make sure that people recognize that they're valued in the contributions that they provide. Also to students and families. Again, the fact that people have been able to adjust this year to fully remote, hybrid, we're getting out of school early, there's lunch, you can pick it up if you want to, now we're coming back in. With the amount of support that you've offered, the understanding, the patience, I just really want to say thank you to families for that and to students for jumping in and continuing to want to learn and be enthusiastic about that. Also to members of local media, and I'll highlight Ronnie Newton sitting out there. It's really been so important to have you to help communicate out all of our messages throughout the year, and we're very grateful for you being able to put that out there in plain language and making sure that people in the community know what's happening and what's going to be happening. So thank you for that. A well-informed citizenry is partially due to an experienced professional media, and thank you for your contributions. I also want to make sure to thank our colleagues on the town council. This year has really demonstrated the need for an even closer collaboration than we've had in prior years, and I feel grateful to all of the members of our town council for their partnership this year, working together to help our community through this pandemic, and also notably for their support of the schools throughout the year and as demonstrated by their budget vote last week. And all of the very kind things that were said were noted and appreciated as well. And finally, to my colleagues around the table, you guys are great, and I don't know if everybody in the community knows how much work goes into being on the Board of Education, but it is many hours a week, and lots of talking to members in the community, reading emails, talking to each other to kind of assess what we've heard and how things are going, staying in touch with our with Tom and our team here. So thank you for your commitment to this volunteer role. So that is, those are all of my thank yous for right now. And to our families as well, because I'm sure you've missed many family dinners. We do not have an executive session. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Lorna. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Without any objection, meeting is adjourned, 9:48 p.m.